The grand halls of Buckingham Palace had witnessed centuries of history, moments of triumph, heartbreak, celebration, and unimaginable secrets. But on this particular afternoon, even the palace walls seemed unusually silent, as though they were waiting for something extraordinary to unfold. Outside the palace gates, hundreds of well-wishers gathered beneath cloudy London skies, hoping to catch a glimpse of the senior royals. Inside, however, an atmosphere of uncertainty lingered over every corridor. For weeks, speculation had swirled through newspapers, television panels, and social media. Royal commentators claimed that tensions behind palace doors had reached a level rarely seen in recent years. Official spokespeople refused to comment, insisting that the royal family remained focused on its public duties. Yet whispers refused to disappear. Among the many rumors circulating was talk of a private meeting requested by Catherine, Princess of Wales. No official diary listed such an engagement. No photograph surfaced. No announcements were made. Still, palace insiders, at least according to countless reports and endless speculation, hinted that an important conversation had taken place. What was discussed remained anyone's guess. Until now. According to this fictional account, King Charles had remained remarkably quiet throughout the growing storm. Every public appearance was carefully measured. Every speech focused on charity, community, and national service. But silence has a way of becoming louder than words, especially when everyone expects answers. Inside one of Buckingham Palace's historic drawing rooms, sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting golden reflections across polished wooden floors. King Charles stood alone for several moments, looking out toward the palace gardens. His expression was thoughtful, not angry, not distressed, simply reflective. The responsibilities of the crown had never been easy, and every generation faced challenges unique to its own time. Moments later, the quiet was interrupted by the soft opening of an antique door. Catherine entered. She carried herself with the same calm confidence the public had admired for years, yet there was an unmistakable seriousness in her expression. The king greeted her warmly. "Thank you for coming." She smiled politely. "Thank you for seeing me, Your Majesty." For several moments, neither spoke. Sometimes silence reveals more than conversation ever could. Eventually, Catherine stepped forward. "There are matters affecting this family that cannot simply be ignored forever." The king nodded slowly. "I know." Her voice remained respectful. "Our family has always faced public attention. That will never change. But uncertainty creates confusion. Confusion creates division." Charles continued listening without interruption. "You've always taught us that duty comes first," Catherine continued. "But duty also means protecting trust." The king's eyes briefly lowered. "Trust," he repeated quietly. "Yes." The room once again became still. Outside, distant bells echoed across London. Inside, every word seemed to carry extraordinary weight. Catherine wasn't speaking out of frustration. She was speaking from concern. Concern for the institution. Concern for the future. Concern for generations yet to come. She understood better than almost anyone that public confidence could never be taken for granted. The monarchy had endured because it adapted while remaining rooted in tradition. But adaptation often required difficult conversations. The king finally took a seat beside the fireplace. "Catherine," he began, "there comes a time when every family must face uncomfortable truths." She remained silent, allowing him to continue. "Not every disagreement becomes public." "Nor should it," she replied. "But when stories grow larger than reality." He paused. "People begin believing whatever fills the silence." Those words lingered. They weren't dramatic. They weren't emotional. Yet they captured exactly why the palace had struggled to contain endless speculation. Catherine nodded. "That's precisely why clarity matters." For a long moment, the king looked toward portraits of previous monarchs lining the walls. Each face represented another chapter in Britain's long constitutional story. Each had faced criticism. Each had faced uncertainty. Each had carried burdens invisible to those outside palace gates. Charles knew history judged leaders not only by victories, but also by how they responded during difficult seasons. He slowly stood again. There have been misunderstandings. Catherine listened carefully. There have been assumptions. Another pause. And there have certainly been stories written without any knowledge of private conversations. His tone remained calm, measured, careful. Perhaps that was exactly what many expected from a monarch. Not defensiveness. Not outrage. Only perspective. Catherine folded her hands. The public doesn't expect perfection. No. They expect honesty. Charles smiled faintly. And sometimes honesty begins with listening. Their conversation shifted away from headlines and toward something much deeper. Family. Responsibility. Legacy. The pressure placed upon every member of the royal family. Neither sought to assign blame. Instead, both recognized how easily misunderstandings could grow when millions of people watched every appearance, every photograph, every expression. Outside the palace, photographers continued waiting. Television crews prepared for evening broadcasts. Experts debated stories they couldn't possibly verify. Inside, however, the discussion remained private, respectful, constructive. After several minutes, Catherine spoke again. I've often believed that strength isn't shown through silence alone. Charles looked at her. It's shown through knowing when to speak. The king considered those words carefully. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps leadership sometimes required carefully chosen words rather than prolonged silence. He walked toward one of the palace windows overlooking the gardens. Visitors strolled peacefully beyond the gates. Children waved Union flags. Tourists admired the historic building. Most would never know what conversations unfolded behind its walls. Nor should they. Yet they deserved confidence that the institution remained united in its purpose. Charles turned back. You know, he said quietly, your generation sees things differently. Catherine smiled. We've inherited a different world. Indeed. A faster one. Much faster. They both laughed softly. For the first time that afternoon, the atmosphere seemed lighter. The conversation had never been about winning an argument. It had been about understanding one another. The king appreciated Catherine's thoughtful approach. She appreciated his willingness to listen. As the afternoon sunlight shifted across the room, Charles finally reached a conclusion. I believe it's time. Catherine looked at him. Time for what? He took a slow breath. Time that people hear directly from me. Her expression remained calm, though curiosity was unmistakable. He continued, not to answer every rumor. Of course. Not to respond to speculation. She nodded. But to remind the country what truly matters. Duty, service, family. Those three words had guided generations of monarchs. Perhaps they would guide this generation as well. Elsewhere inside Buckingham Palace, senior advisors quietly prepared briefing papers for upcoming engagements. None yet knew exactly what the king intended to say. Only that something had changed during this meeting. Something important. Word slowly spread among palace staff that His Majesty had requested revisions to an upcoming public address. No explanation accompanied the request. Only urgency. As evening approached, the palace lights illuminated one room after another. Outside, reporters noticed unusual activity. Vehicles arrived. Senior officials entered discreetly. Questions multiplied. Was an announcement coming? Had the king finally decided to address the growing speculation? Nobody knew. Inside his private study, Charles sat alone with a blank sheet of paper before him. He picked up his pen, paused, then slowly began writing the opening lines of what could become one of the most closely watched speeches of his reign. The first sentence would determine everything. And before another word could be written, a quiet knock echoed through the room. The king looked up as his private secretary stepped inside. Your Majesty, the aide said softly, the nation is ready whenever you are. Charles glanced once more at the unfinished speech before carefully adding a final line. Our greatest strength has never been perfection, but our shared commitment to duty, service, and one another. He set down the pen with quiet resolve. Tomorrow, the world would hear his voice, not to fuel rumors or answer speculation, but to reaffirm the values that had guided the monarchy for generations. Outside, Buckingham Palace stood illuminated against the night sky, while a new chapter, one built on unity rather than whispers, was about to begin.